Hey, boys and girls. Happy holidays, and I hope your winter break is going well. Well, if you go outside at all during this break, you're going to notice that there's some green out there. Yep, that's what I said. Even in the middle of the winter in the Midwest, you're going to see green if you look for it. And that green usually comes from our conifers or evergreen trees. They're the trees that stay evergreen. It doesn't shed its needles or its leaves because they contain water that keep them hydrated and green all winter. They're also called conifers because they produce cones that you might see drop from the trees in the fall. Now, behind your Christmas trees and other trees that are grown for the holidays is usually a farm family. Yep, that's what I said. Remember, I come from the Champaign County Farm Bureau, and I talk to kids all over about where their food comes from, but also about the other crops that are grown and raised by families just like this one. This is Roy and his family, and he's a lawyer, but in his extra time, he likes to grow Christmas trees and produce them on Quail Creek Ranch Christmas Tree Farm in Portland, Oregon. Now, his customers come to his farm and they cut down trees for their holiday decorations. But it takes a whole family in order to take care of those trees, because that's what farmers do. They take care of what is growing so that you and I can benefit from it. Now, in Illinois, when we talk about all kinds of evergreens, we talk about the 72,000 acres of coniferous forest. That means a forest of conifers it's mostly in the southern 1/3 of our state, because here in the middle of our state is farmland where we grow corn and beans. Up north is more city. So most of the conifer forests are down south in the tip of Illinois. But we have a lot of conifers. And in those forests, more than 75% of our wildlife habitat loves to dwell, because many times those animals will find shelter beneath or inside of those conifer trees during the cold winter months. Now, let me tell you about another animal. During the Jurassic and early Cretaceous period, many of our large herbivores, especially stegosaurs and sauropods, fed on these types of trees and plants. They had just the right teeth and jaws in order to munch down on those strong needles and cones and have a nice snack. Now let's go to our seasons with evergreens. Remember I said they're evergreen. So watch for those yellow circles for evergreens, and the red circles are going to be for the deciduous trees, or all the trees that normally lose their leaves. Well, in the summer, you can hardly tell the difference. They're all green. In the fall, you'll see that the evergreens stay green and the deciduous trees do what? They change colors. They become beautiful oranges and yellows and reds, but that just means that those leaves are drying up and dying and will eventually fall to the ground. So that in the winter, when you're looking for green, you're going to see green in that yellow circle from the evergreens, but the deciduous trees are going to be bare. Their leaves have fallen to the ground, and they provide mulch and coverage for plants on the ground, but no longer are they full of leaves. And then in the spring, we start to see growth. Back there in the background of that yellow circle, you'll see the evergreens are full and green even in the spring. And the regular trees, the deciduous trees, are blossoming and blooming and growing new leaves. Now, we are so lucky to be in a place where we can grow all different kinds of things. And there are Christmas tree farms or evergreen farms that are right here in Illinois. There are close to 350 million real Christmas trees currently growing on Christmas tree farms in the entire United States, all planted by farmers. Now, Christmas trees are grown in all 50 states as well. The top producing states are Oregon, North Carolina, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Washington. And the average growing time for a tree is about 7 years. Now, if you look at this picture behind me, you'll notice that there are trees of all different sizes. And that's because a farmer never cuts all of his trees down at once. He cuts the mature ones, maybe the 7-year-old trees that are ready to sell. And then he grows other trees at different stages based on when he last cut a tree down. So you can see he's got 1-year-old trees and 2-year-old trees, all the way up to 7-year-old trees. And right here in the background, he might even have a teenager. Who knows? But all different types of trees growing at all different rates. Now, different types of conifers. I'm going to talk to you about 3 different types so that you might, even in your winter hikes, be able to go out and look and say, oh, I know what this is. Because so many of us say, oh, that's a pine tree. But technically, not all evergreens are pine trees. Well, let's talk about what a pine tree is. Pine trees are prickly pines, and their needles grow in packets. So we say prickly pine packet. Pine needles come in packets and have sharp points. So the next time you've got your hands on a pine tree that you think is a pine tree, take a look at that branch and notice, does it have needles that are maybe long and pointed or even short and pointed? But the most telling fact is trace those needles back to the stem and notice how they're attached to that stem. Are they attached one at a time, or are they attached in packets of 2 or 3 or 4 or even 5? If you can pinch and pull those needles out in a packet, you've got a pine, and they are prickly because they have a pointed tip. Now, here's another one. Single, square, scaly spruce. This is a spruce sample, and spruce have a scaly branch or stem that the needles come from. It looks scaly because it's got lots of different deep ridges, and it's kind of an interesting texture. Now, it says single. That means those needles are attached in packets of just 1, not like the pine tree. Those needles, if you rub them between your fingers, will roll. And the reason they roll is because they are 3-dimensional. They're actually square. So if you roll them, you'll feel bump, 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 because they'll roll in your hands. They are not flat. Now, here's the other thing you have to know, that they can be very short and they can be very sharp as well. So spruce, single, square, scaly spruce. Now, here's the last one that I'm going to tell you. I said I would do 3, but there are more than 3. This is the flat, friendly fir. This is my favorite for a Christmas tree. I don't know what your family has at your house. They're all beautiful. But fir trees are flat, have needles that are flat, and have a rounded end. That's why we call them flat, friendly firs. So these needles, if you pull them out of your stem, you'll notice that they come out in packets of 1. They are flat. That means you cannot roll them between your fingers like the spruce. They have a top and a bottom, no sides. So they won't roll. They're very flat. And they're friendly. You know why? Because when you rub your hands up and down a fir branch or tree, they're soft. They feel furry. And if you step on one of these needles, because they're rounded and they're flat, it probably won't hurt you. It's also very flexible. When you bend a fir needle, you'll notice how flexible it is. And there's one last test for a fir. This is my favorite part. If you tear those needles and rub them between your fingers, you'll notice that they smell amazing. You'll really, really enjoy that smell. Okay, boys and girls, now for the hands-on portion of the conifer lesson. So we've talked about how conifers grow and are adapted for winter with their needles that are hydrated. That means they have water in them and they keep those trees nice and green all year round. And whether it's a spruce or a pine with pine packet needles, or it's a fir tree like my Christmas tree that I have in my house. They all have needles and they all produce cones. And there are Christmas tree farmers who, with their families and friends, grow Christmas trees and they harvest them at about 7 years and sell those. Well, today we're going to grow a Christmas tree. Not a real Christmas tree, but it's still something fun that you can try. I love growing things in the winter because you don't often get to see a lot of green in the winter besides those evergreens. So you got a sponge from your teacher. It might look like this. It might be a little smaller like this. You might even have one with a texture like this that has the scrubber and it has a spongier other side. It doesn't matter what kind of sponge you got, or even if you didn't get one, you can find a sponge around the house, and I want you to cut it in the shape of a tree, an evergreen tree. This is pretty easy. What I like to do is I like to snip from the bottom in order to make a trunk or the stem of the tree. Then I cut the 2 pieces off at the bottom. So now I have the bottom of the tree. And then guess what? All I do is I cut to the point, and then I cut from the point on down so that I have a Christmas tree shape. And if you've got a teeny tiny sponge, you can still do this as well. They're just going to be smaller cuts. I'm going to cut in, and I'm going to cut in, and I'm going to cut my little trunk out. And boys and girls, if you can't do this, if it's just too hard for your hands to cut, or you don't have an adult who can help you, look at that cute little tree right there, then leave it as a square. It's no big deal. We're still gonna grow, okay? So I've got 3 different types of Christmas trees right here that I have cut out, and 3 different types of sponges, but this is gonna work. You also got a baggie of grass seed. And some of the grass seed that you may have gotten might have a little bit of soil worked into it. It's perfect, it will grow. So what I want you to do is to put your sponge on a plate, a paper plate or a regular plate. The reason we do this is so that we don't cause a mess, right? And so that that water can soak up into the sponge and stay moist all the time. Remember, those conifers retain a lot of moisture all year round. So these conifers need some moisture too. So when I water my seeds on my tree, I want for them to be nice and not soaking wet, but wet enough. So now I'm going to sprinkle some grass seeds on my tree, and I might have enough to do a couple trees. But you got a baggie of seeds, and it probably will cover just your one tree. It might cover a couple of others. If you've got this type of sponge, you're going to want to put the seeds on the yellow side, okay? And spread those out. Try to cover all areas of that Christmas tree. Then, this is the easy step. Take some water. And by the way, boys and girls, I didn't say this at the beginning, but dampen your sponges before you do this. So just add a little bit of water and squeeze it out so they're a little bit damp. Those seeds will stick a lot better. And then spritz those seeds, and you are done. Put this in the sun where it can sit for a few days. Keep the sponge moist. That means check it every day and touch it. Does it still feel wet to the touch? If it doesn't, give it a couple of sponges and wait. What will happen is that seed, even without the soil, will germinate and grow, and pretty soon you're going to end up giving your Christmas tree a haircut. You'll have to mow your Christmas tree, believe it or not. So boys and girls, enjoy this activity. Have a lot of fun with it. Can't wait to see you giving your trees a haircut.